Update. My grandpa gave me some money to invest in my business on my birthday, but my parents forced me to give it to my brother saying he was struggling, but then asked me for rent because I had turned 18 now, so I cut them off. 5 years later they contacted me to fix my brother's mess, but I just told them no. The relationship was always one-sided, with me giving and him taking. Lastly, a lot of you asked why I even gave my brother the money. To be honest, I know that was a very dumb decision, but you have to understand I was only 18. I was still in high school and living with my parents. They never gave up on pressuring me to give my brother the money. I still have no idea how they found out about the money in the first place, but from the moment I woke up in the morning to when I went to sleep at night, that was all my parents talked about. They used every tactic they knew to make me feel guilty about not helping him. I kept some of the amount Grandpa gave me, but most of it I gave my brother because of how guilty my parents made me feel. Now, on to what happened recently. After my parents reached out asking for help, they went radio silent for about a week. I figured they gave up on me and found someone else to bail my brother out, but then out of nowhere, they invited me to dinner to talk things through. I debated whether or not to go. Part of me thought it might bring closure if I faced them in person, but I also knew it would probably just be another guilt trip. In the end, I decided to go, not because I wanted to help, but because I wanted to see if anything had really changed. Spoiler alert, it hasn't. The dinner was at a local restaurant, which I found odd since my parents usually insisted on hosting things at home. I arrived, and they were already seated, looking weirdly happy to see me. The whole vibe felt forced, like they were trying too hard to act normal. At first, things were civil. We exchanged some polite small talk, and I almost started to think maybe they were actually trying to reconnect without any ulterior motives. But that hope didn't last long. About halfway through dinner, the real reason I was invited came up. They weren't asking for money, but they still wanted me to use my success to help my brother. They said that since my business has connections with investors and some people in the financial world, I could make a few introductions that might help straighten things out for him. It wasn't a direct ask for cash, but it was still a favor I didn't want to get involved in. I could feel that old, familiar feeling creeping back, the same feeling I had when they pressured me to give my brother the loan years ago. And just when I thought the conversation couldn't get worse, my brother showed up. He wasn't even supposed to be there, at least, they never mentioned that he'd be joining us. He just walked in, looking smug and acting like he owned the place. From the moment he sat down, it was clear he hadn't changed one bit. He was loud, arrogant, and completely unapologetic about the mess he'd gotten himself into. It was as if he expected me to roll out the red carpet and fix everything for him. He also, for some reason, acted like I owed him. He actually had the audacity to suggest that since I was so lucky with my business, it was only fair that I help him out, like I should feel grateful for the opportunity he's given me to do good. He even made snide comments about how my business wouldn't have taken off if I hadn't loaned him the money back then. He genuinely thought that his failure somehow contributed to my success. Can you believe that? It took everything in me not to walk out right then and there. But the dinner was the final nail in the coffin for me. I realized that nothing had changed. My parents are still enabling my brother, and he's still the same entitled, selfish person he's always been. They're not looking for help because they care about me or respect how far I've gotten. They just see me as a solution to a problem they don't want to deal with themselves. After that dinner, I went straight home and blocked their numbers. I thought I'd feel guilty, but honestly, I just feel relieved. For the first time in a long time, I know I made the right decision. That's where things stand right now. I've cut them off for good this time, and I feel at peace with my decision. I know some people might think I'm being harsh, but I've learned the hard way that setting boundaries is necessary, especially with family. I'm finally putting myself first, and it feels good. I'll post another update if anything changes, but for now, I'm moving on with my life. Thanks again to everyone who gave advice, it really helped me see things clearly. Update 2. It's been about 6 months since my last update, and things have gotten even more complicated. I thought I had closed the door on this situation, but apparently, my family isn't ready to let go. Since blocking my parents, I started getting messages from extended family, some aunts, uncles, and cousins, telling me I was cold and heartless for abandoning my brother when he needed me the most. A few even said that I've forgotten where I came from now that I've found success. It's frustrating, especially since none of these people offered to step up and help him themselves. At first, I ignored their messages and hoped they'd drop it, but the guilt started creeping in again, and I found myself wondering if I was being too harsh. I kept thinking, what if his situation is worse than I realized? So, I unblocked my parents to try and get some clarity. As soon as I reached out, I found out just how deep my brother's mess really was. It turns out he owes over $90,000 in debt, mostly from gambling and some shady personal loans. When I heard the amount, I was floored. This wasn't just a small mistake or a string of bad luck, this was a disaster he had knowingly created. And the worst part? That money I gave him on my 18th birthday, the one my parents guilted me into giving him, was never used for rent. Instead, he blew it on gambling and a failed attempt to start some half-baked business. Learning that just made me angrier. All this time, I believed that the loan was at least helping him stay afloat, but no, he gambled it away and now he's buried himself even deeper. My parents tried to downplay it, of course. They kept saying everyone makes mistakes and families should stick together, but I wasn't having it. I reminded them that they could just give him the money they promised to give me, double the original loan, remember? That would help him pay down some of his debt. That's when even more truth came out. They admitted they never had the money to begin with. It was just a ploy to get me to step in, either with my own cash or my business connections. What they really wanted was for me to find him a high-paying job in my network so he could slowly work off his debt. I was furious. Not only had they lied to me, but they were also trying to shift the responsibility of fixing his mess onto me once again. Of course, I refused to help, and they didn't take it well. They said I was being selfish and that I needed to remember the importance of family. After I shut them down, they started contacting other relatives and twisted the story to make it seem like I was turning my back on them. I got bombarded with messages from cousins saying things like, "You are successful now, it wouldn't hurt you to help out, and he's your brother, aren't you ashamed to abandon him like this?" It was exhausting. At that point, I realized I had to set some serious boundaries, not just with my parents, but with the rest of the family too. I responded to the relatives who reached out, and I told them that if they were so concerned about my brother, they could step up and help him out. None of them had anything to say after that, they just quietly stopped messaging me, which only proved to me that they weren't really interested in helping. They just wanted to guilt me into doing it. The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. I kept replaying everything in my head, from how they forced me to give up the money on my 18th birthday to how they demanded rent from me the very next day. It hit me that the only reason they wanted me to pay rent was to probably give my brother even more money. They were just using me as another source of cash for my brother's lifestyle. I wish things could have been different with my parents and brother, but I've accepted that some relationships just can't be fixed. If they ever truly want to reconnect with me, it'll have to come from a place of respect and not manipulation. But for now, I'm done. I'm not going to let guilt or family pressure pull me back into a toxic situation. Thanks again to everyone who commented and shared advice. Your support has really helped me stay strong throughout this mess. I'll post another update if anything major happens, but for now, I'm moving forward and not looking back.